My stepfather promised to pay for my therapy, then called the clinic pretending to be me and canceled every session. He said, "Strong people don't need strangers to fix them." I reported him to the clinic's director, and they provided a phone log I used as evidence. When I filed the report, and my mother found out, I didn't grow up in a loud or violent household. On the surface, everything looked normal. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Madison, Wisconsin. Our lawn was always trimmed, my mom kept the kitchen spotless, and we went to church most Sundays. But the silence in our house was a different kind of noise, one that said don't ask questions and don't feel too much. That kind of silence trains you. It gets under your skin. And I didn't even realize how deep it went until I started therapy. My real dad died when I was 8.
Car accident.
I remember the phone ringing and my mom dropping to her knees. After that, she was never the same. 2 years later, she met Mike. He owned a construction company. He was clean-cut, always polite in public, the kind of guy people trusted fast. He married my mom after about a year of dating, and that was that. Suddenly, I had a new dad. Mike never hit me. Not once. And that's what made everything harder to explain for years. What he did was more invisible. He chipped away at me in small, constant ways. If I cried, he'd mock me. If I wanted to talk about my dad, he'd sigh and say I was stuck in the past. If I showed anger, he'd say I was unstable. "You're too soft. You need to toughen up." That was one of his favorite lines. I learned to keep everything in. I became the quiet kid in school. I made good grades because it was one of the few things he couldn't criticize. But I started waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing, with this deep fear I couldn't explain. I used to think maybe I was just broken. College was my first taste of freedom. I went to UW-Madison and got a partial scholarship. Lived on campus. The first few months were peaceful, but then the anxiety came back. I'd wake up shaking. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't concentrate. I'd freeze during exams and my hands would sweat nonstop. It got to the point where I thought I was losing my mind. One night, I found myself in the campus clinic at 2 a.m. after a panic attack that left me gasping for air. The nurse gave me some water and gently asked if I'd ever talked to someone about trauma. That word hit me hard.
Trauma.
I always thought that meant war or abuse. Not a life like mine. But I booked a session with the student counselor the next day. That first appointment changed everything. It was the first time someone asked me what I felt and actually listened.
No judgment. No mocking.
Just space to speak. She told me that what I went through was emotional abuse. I didn't want to believe it. I defended Mike, even. He didn't hit me. He worked hard. He paid the bills. But she just looked at me and said, "You don't have to bleed to be hurt." The clinic could only see me a few times due to student limits, but the counselor encouraged me to find a long-term therapist. That's when I told my mom. I didn't expect her to clap or cry. I just hoped maybe she'd be glad I was trying to get help. Instead, she just said, "Therapy's expensive." Then Mike chimed in and said he'd pay for it. Just like that. No sarcasm. No lecture. I should have known better. I found a licensed trauma therapist in town. Weekly sessions, $120 a pop. Mike gave me his credit card to keep on file. The receptionist even confirmed it with him over the phone. First few weeks went fine. I'd go every Tuesday at 4 p.m. We were finally digging into stuff I'd never said out loud before, stuff about my dad's death, how Mike treated me, how my mom never stood up for me. Then one Thursday, I got a call from the clinic saying I'd missed my session again. I said no, that wasn't right. I was just there Tuesday. They said no. I'd been marked as a no-show 3 times this month. I checked the online portal. There were 3 cancellations, each marked client canceled. I hadn't canceled anything. I called them back and asked when the cancellations happened. They gave me the dates and times. 2 were on days I was in class, the other was during a midterm. I knew I hadn't called. That night I sat with it for hours before I finally asked Mike directly. I didn't even get halfway through the question before he smirked and said, "Strong people don't need strangers to fix them." Then added, I'm not paying someone to fill your head with bullshit about how your life was so hard.
I stared at him. I didn't even know what to say.
My mom was on the couch, watching TV like she hadn't heard any of it. I asked her, "Did you know?" She didn't answer. Just said, "Let's not start something." That was it for me. Something snapped. I called the clinic back the next day and asked to speak to the director. I explained everything, what I suspected, what Mike said, and how the cancellations weren't from me. The director paused. She said she needed to check a few things. I asked her, point blank, "Did someone call pretending to be me?" She called back 20 minutes later. She told me they checked the logs. There were 3 calls, all from the same number. She said they recorded them because all appointment calls go through the front desk line. Then she said, "It's clearly not your voice. And the caller says your name, but it's a man's voice." She didn't say it directly, but I knew. Mike had called the clinic and pretended to be me. He used my name, canceled my sessions, and never thought I'd find out. She sent me a copy of the call logs and a written statement confirming the impersonation. I filed a police report that same day for identity fraud and impersonation. It wasn't about getting him arrested. It was about having something official, some proof that what he did wasn't just a disagreement. It was deliberate,
Cruel.
meant to stop me from healing. When my mom found out, she didn't ask if I was okay.
She didn't yell at Mike.
She didn't cry. She just said, "You didn't have to go to the cops. You made us look bad." That sentence broke me more than anything else. More than the cancellations. More than the lies. Because that's when I realized she'd never choose me, not even when I was telling the truth. I moved out 2 weeks later. Stayed on a friend's couch for a while. I didn't just cut contact. I cut them both out of my future. But the story doesn't end there. Because I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let what he did slide. I had the proof. I had the rage. And I was going to use both. I didn't want revenge just to feel good. I wanted him to lose what he cared about. And I knew exactly where to start. I didn't just want to move on. I wanted to expose him. See, Mike wasn't just some guy working construction. He owned a small residential contracting company, about a dozen guys under him. He'd built a solid reputation in the Madison area over the years. Church sponsors, youth sports donations, word-of-mouth jobs in the suburbs. He'd cultivated this image of being a community man, someone who helped out neighbors, mentored young workers, even offered discounts to veterans. People trusted him, and he cared about that trust. It was his currency. So when I moved out, I started thinking bigger. Therapy wasn't just about healing, it helped me get clear. Mike always played with power. He used people's silence as a weapon. So I decided not to be silent anymore. First, I made sure the police report was finalized and filed properly. I added a statement, and the clinic director submitted her written documentation. I also requested the call recordings. They couldn't give me the actual audio without a subpoena, but they did provide a transcript. That was enough for what I had in mind. Next, I found out that Mike's company had a Yelp page, a Google business listing, and a Facebook profile. I didn't leave fake reviews. I didn't lie. I just wrote a detailed, factual review under my real name. I explained that Mike Davis, the owner of the company, had impersonated his own stepchild to cancel medical appointments at a licensed mental health clinic. I included the fact that the clinic confirmed this in writing and that a police report had been filed. I said I wasn't posting for revenge. I was posting because people deserved to know what kind of person they were trusting to come into their homes and deal with their families. Within 48 hours, his Facebook inbox was flooded with comments. Friends started asking questions. One mom from our church replied to my post and said her teenage son had worked for Mike last summer and left because he made weird comments and got too personal. That snowballed into more people sharing stuff they'd been too uncomfortable to bring up at the time. Mike's response? He tried to call me, left a voicemail saying, "You don't know what you're doing. You're hurting people who never hurt you." The irony made me sick. I didn't respond. Then my mom messaged me. Long, messy texts, accusing me of ruining Mike's life, of dragging family through the mud. I didn't answer her either. But what I didn't expect was how the pressure cracked things open on their end. A few days later, one of Mike's former employees messaged me anonymously. Said he quit after finding out Mike wasn't reporting all his workers to the IRS. Said Mike would take cash under the table for jobs, then underpay the guys and tell them to deal with it. He said if I really wanted to hit Mike where it hurt, I should look into his books. That was when I got serious. I remembered my mom always handled their household taxes. She had a laptop she used for all their bookkeeping. Mike never touched that stuff. I knew the password. And even though I'd left the house, I still had the spare key from my high school days. She never changed the locks. I waited until I knew they were at church. Drove back, heart pounding the whole time. Went in through the garage. Grabbed the laptop. I was in and out in 5 minutes. I copied everything, QuickBooks files, invoices, expense sheets. I didn't change a thing. Just saved the data, put the laptop back, and left. Later that night, I combed through everything. There were clear patterns. Multiple payments from private clients labeled as cash, entries that didn't match job estimates, labor costs with no tax deductions. It took me a few days to piece together a folder of files. I sent it all, anonymously, to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. I didn't want him just embarrassed. I wanted him audited. But things kept unraveling even before that could happen. Turns out the clinic director, after learning what happened, decided to file a complaint of her own with the state licensing board. She believed what Mike did was a form of psychological interference, possibly a violation of laws protecting patient confidentiality and autonomy. Even though he wasn't a medical professional, impersonating a patient to cancel care crossed serious lines. She told me she was going to testify if this ever went to court. That gave me more strength than I can explain. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone was willing to stand beside me and say, "This is not okay." That's when my mom started showing up at my dorm building. Not yelling. Just sitting in her car in the lot across the street. Watching. Once she tried to talk to me. Said she didn't know what to believe anymore. I told her she believed exactly what she wanted to believe, and that she could live with it. But things weren't done falling apart. And the worst hadn't even happened yet. The audit didn't happen right away. Government wheels turn slow. But the rumors spread faster than I ever imagined. Within a month, Mike lost 3 major contracts, 2 homeowners pulled out mid-renovation, and demanded partial refunds. Word got around that something shady was going on, and clients didn't want to risk being tied to a lawsuit or scandal. But here's the twist I never saw coming. One of the families he was working for? The husband was a licensed therapist. Apparently, the guy's wife had seen my online post and connected the dots. She asked her husband if he knew anything about this Mike Davis. The therapist looked into it, saw my public post, then reached out to the clinic where I'd gone. They confirmed they had filed a formal complaint and that there was a police report open. The husband emailed Mike directly and said he was not comfortable continuing business with someone who interfered in another person's mental health care, especially a young adult recovering from family trauma. Mike lost the contract on the spot. That job alone was worth over $30,000. Now here's where it gets even messier. I thought my mom would double down on defending him, but instead, she started unraveling. I found out through one of my cousins that my mom had started going to church alone. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. She told people Mike was going through something and that she was keeping her distance. It didn't add up at first, until I got a message out of nowhere from my half-brother, Ryan. He's Mike's son from a previous marriage. We barely ever talked. He was older, had moved out when I was still a teen. But now he said, "I know what you're doing. And I want you to know, you're not the first one he tried to control like this." That stopped me cold. Ryan and I got coffee a few days later. He told me things I never knew. That Mike used to go through his phone, read his texts, call his girlfriend's parents pretending to be Ryan to break up with her. That he threatened to cut him off financially if he didn't go to trade school instead of college. He said Mike once faked a call to his employer and got him fired when he tried to move out. He said he always had to be the one in control. And when he couldn't control you anymore, he snapped. Ryan never reported it. He just left, moved to Minnesota, and built a quiet life.
But now he wanted to help.
He offered to make a statement if I ever needed one. He said, it's about time someone held him accountable. With that, I started building a paper trail. I got the full report from the clinic, the therapist's statement, and now Ryan's email. I updated the police file. I even sent everything to a local investigative journalist who covered family court and medical ethics stories. She didn't promise anything, but she said it was the kind of case that could explode if the right pieces aligned. But Mike didn't take it lying down. A week later, I got served with papers. He was suing me for defamation. It wasn't a criminal case, it was civil. He claimed I'd ruined his business with false, malicious statements. He wanted damages. Tens of thousands. He was trying to scare me into silence.
It worked for about a day.
I cried. I panicked. I thought maybe I'd gone too far. But then I remembered the recordings, the transcripts, the police report, the therapist's backing. And most importantly, I hadn't lied. So I got a lawyer. A pro bono one through the Student Legal Center. And when she read everything I had, she said, "This isn't defamation. This is exposure." The court date got set for 6 weeks out. And I knew one way or another, I was going to make him answer for what he did. The day of the hearing, I wore the only decent blazer I owned and sat next to my student lawyer in a small county courtroom just outside downtown Madison. Mike walked in wearing his usual construction polo, like he didn't need to try. Like he still thought he was going to win. He didn't have a lawyer. That surprised me. I guess he thought the fear alone would be enough to make me fold. He looked over at me, smirked, and gave a little head shake like I was still the naive kid who cried too much. The judge came in. We sat down. And my lawyer laid it all out. She started with the police report. Then the written statement from the clinic's director. Then the transcripts of the 3 phone calls Mike made to impersonate me. She read them aloud, word for word. She showed the phone logs matching his number. She presented the email from my half-brother and even a short affidavit from my therapist confirming the harm caused by the canceled sessions. Mike didn't say much. He tried to interrupt once. The judge told him to wait his turn. When it finally was his turn, he mumbled something about family drama and kids not understanding boundaries. He denied ever calling the clinic. That's when my lawyer dropped the last piece. A written statement from the clinic's tech support department verifying that the phone number that canceled my sessions matched the one Mike had on file from his payment information. The same number he used to book the first appointment. It was over. The judge didn't even need time to deliberate. He dismissed the lawsuit, said there was no defamation, only documented truth. Then he looked at Mike and said something I'll never forget. "From what I see here, you interfered with a young adult's access to medical care for personal reasons. That's not just inappropriate. It's dangerous. You should consider yourself lucky this is a civil matter." Mike didn't respond. He didn't even look at me as he left. But that wasn't the end. The local reporter I'd emailed before, she published a story 2 weeks later. The headline was subtle: Mental Health, Manipulation, and the Cost of Silence. A Wisconsin student speaks out. She changed my name, but not his. The article went into detail. The impersonation, the clinic statement, the lawsuit. She even quoted the judge. She blurred his company name just enough to stay legal, but everyone who knew him knew exactly who it was. Within a month, Mike's business was done. Clients ghosted him. Former employees started speaking out. One even claimed he was owed back wages. His church stopped featuring him on their sponsor list. His reputation didn't just crack, it shattered. But the biggest blow came from the IRS. I never got the full story, but a former family friend confirmed it quietly. Mike got audited. Hard. They found years of discrepancies. He was hit with fines. Possibly worse. His accounts were frozen for weeks. Equipment was repossessed. That house he loved so much, the one with the big garage and his name etched into the driveway, he sold it that spring. Quietly. Cheap. My mom? She stayed for a while. Then she didn't. Last I heard, she moved in with her sister-in-law Cross. We haven't spoken. I doubt we ever will. I kept going to therapy.
Paid for it myself this time.
Every week. I still wake up some nights panicking. Still deal with the damage. But I'm no longer silent. I'm no longer afraid of being the problem just for having a voice. People say revenge doesn't fix anything. But when someone tries to erase you, and you make sure the world sees them for what they really are, that's not revenge. That's justice.